We have a signal code for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was ironic, and I know that pro words and signal codes and all that stuff are important because of radio transmissions, but I found it ironic that somebody called me and told me that a deputy had passed away. I was killed on duty,
Yeah.
and he just said, "Hey, man, did you hear that so and so signal 7?" And bro, sorry, it just kind of hit me. Um, I'd never worked with the guy, but I knew him, and it was obvious. It was tragic.
Right.
But it started striking me. I was like, man, this guy did X number of years at this organization. There's a lot to be said for, 25, 30, 31, 33 years in anywhere,
Yeah.
especially in an organization as active as ours. Um, to be murdered like or to just even pass away, while they're before they've retired, it's just it's hard to grip. And then when, just as a matter of fact, signal 7, it's like, so you have this, say, 20-year career, and it's all comprised of, or it's all boiled down to a word and a number. It's like, really, is that all this was? I mean, are we going to look at this that sterile?
Yeah.
And I know we do, because if we don't, I mean, you're a human being. You're not going to survive 25 years of eating every one of those. You can't do it, man.
Yeah.
But I don't think we lose empathy. I think we're aware of it, but I think that we have to harden ourselves and shield ourselves from it. So the conversations that you and I would have sitting at a table, there's 2 librarians or non-responders sitting at the next table. They're not going to sleep for weeks.
Yeah.
But for us, it was the call that started our day.
Right.
I think my big concern too is, and this is another offshoot of what we're talking about. We started off with funny stories and now getting serious. If you were ever in I don't want to say traumatic, because people throw around the word trauma so much. Oh, that's a trauma. No, that's a scary situation. But I don't think that, like in the military, I don't think responders will talk about what's going on. After a call like that, say family in the middle of the intersection. Everybody good? Yep.
Right.
Bro,
Yep. Ready for
let's
service.
let's stop.
Yeah.
And that's the expectation, and some people are capable of doing that for a period of time.
Yeah.
There are others that need to take a minute. And I think that minute should be given and should be respected. I just don't think that I don't think those communities and those cultures are ready to take that minute to ask. And granted, business is still being conducted.
Right.
You still got to go and, I mean, say you're on that call for 5 hours because it's a fatality. It takes a while for detectives to get there and do their job. But, if that happens on your way into roll call, you still have 7 hours to go.
Yeah.
What are you going to experience in the 7 hours that are going to pile onto that? I think they call it allostatic load, the physical and mental traumas and stresses that continue over time that you can't release. And a 12-hour shift ending with 12 hours of break and then going right back into it, 12 hours is not enough time to recenter yourself, man.
Yeah.
I would imagine that adrenaline is still moving through your body, or remnants of. I mean, there's been times that I've gotten home in the morning that, I get off at 7 a.m., it's 11:30, and I'm trying to convince myself to go to sleep for 2 hours. And, and I'm not alone. I am not alone, bro. And
I've definitely.
I'm happy to say that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are getting more comfortable with talking about it,
Yeah.
but I don't think the profession and those cultures on a whole are willing to say that yes, this is something we need to do.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, we have crisis counselors that can come out, or we have peer support. Peer support's going to come out. First of all, you think I'm going to tell somebody within my organization that I'm having a problem?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Because then you run the risk. And now this could all be in your mind. There have been people that have said, "Hey, I've got an issue with this," and they've been given the time and they've been treated well. And there's been some that weren't treated so well. So it's hard to tell where you're going to fall in there. And in your mind, you're showing a weakness, which you and I both, I think we can agree that takes courage, and it's a strength to be vulnerable and say that you have an issue and to take care of yourself and to recognize that. And I think it's a big deal. But in your mind, you're showing that you're weak, You can't handle yourself. You're not capable of doing this job. People are not going to follow you because they've lost faith in your ability to lead. The only job that you are prepared for, that you enjoy doing, that you've wanted to do since you were, 5 years old with a cowboy hat and a little 10 badge on your shirt, could be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And if all of that stuff doesn't happen, you run the risk of thinking that you're going to be relegated to sitting on a desk or put out to pasture. Then you lose, you start looking at then being isolated from everybody else. You're losing your tribe. You're losing your purpose. You're losing some type of relevance. These are all the things that could be going through somebody's head when they're going through some of this. And I think, I feel that needs to be acknowledged, and not just with a colored bracelet or a traveling teddy bear or a YouTube video.
Right.
I think somebody that's got some credibility should be able to walk into a room full of cops and say, "Look here, folks. These are the things that have occurred in my career. Because of these things, I have this going on, and I've recognized that, and it's okay." The organization, the culture, the profession of law enforcement, or any of the first responder professions are going to take care of me, and everybody should feel as safe as doing that as they do to come to work, organizationally. I think if somebody comes up, some tooth chipper or some very, very well respected person stands up and says, "Look, I got this issue," I think that would give a lot of other people permission, for lack of a better word, to say something, to bear it and say, "Okay, it's cool because even if something goes bad, I'm at least in company with this dude, so that's kind of cool."
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Sorry, I got off on a tangent.
No. I'm really glad you brought that up. I've experienced the same things. What I'm curious, when you take a minute, I think that has always left me with a question, just in my mind as to, right, because if I'm taking a minute, what is it that you're doing in that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour, you're off for the rest of the shift? How do you work through that in some way different from just going to the next call and trying to avoid it? And I'm going to preface this with my story.
You said the key word.
Right?
Avoid.
My story.
Push it down, man.
Day one in FTO, first day. First call, I go out, and it is our Section 8 housing in the very active district that we had. So my very first call I go out on, and the officer, I already told you, like, black guy, but he was super calm. And we are rolling up, and he's not necessarily telling me what it is, he's telling me what to get out. And I think, if I remember this correctly, and he might be able to correct me on that, but I think he didn't even tell me what the call was other than the signal code, and he was going to kind of let me, figure that out. So I get out and make sure and get the crime scene tape, make sure and get this document so we can log anybody in, anybody out. And I'm just like, okay, and that's in my brain. I'm just focusing on the little things, make sure I don't forget anything. And we go out and I start setting up tape, and I don't know what's really going on yet. And so we get in and we start talking to the mother. So the mother at night went to sleep, and she had 2 mattresses that she put on the floor with her newborn baby. Her newborn baby
I already know where this is going.
was sleeping with her, and it rolled behind, upside down, head first, and was caught between the wall and there and passed away. And so we have to go in, see the baby, take pictures of the baby. So I have to go in, and I see the body, and I'm kind of helping the detectives. Obviously, they don't want me to screw this up. So for my very first call, they want me to just observe, make sure and take down notes of anybody who comes in, comes out. So I do that. And I think one of the things that really made an impression, it's a tragic, tragic situation. Automatically, just as a human, I was mad at her for doing what I think is something that's dumb, because I don't know, and I don't even know. I'm just a human who sees that there's a loss of life of an infant who didn't do anything wrong because they didn't know to do anything right or wrong. So it's definitely her fault. And she is crying, but about, I'm going to say 45 minutes into us being there, I come outside. I've got the detectives leaving, so I have to write him out. Somebody else stopped by. I had to write them out. And she is now sitting over with one of the other ladies who lives there, and they're smoking cigarettes together. And the other lady is saying something to her, and they're laughing. And the second that I saw the mom laughing, I don't know. I think as a human, I was just like, I don't know if I'm cut out to do this. Day one, first call, and I see a mom laughing after she just killed her own child.
Well, you're too young in the job to realize that that's probably just a shock response.
Yeah.
Not knowing how to react. Think for a second, if you would, how that scene would have been if you had an infant at home.
Oh, yeah.
Because it happens.
Yeah.
It happens. I mean, it's either falling down between the bed and the wall, or a parent rolling over and suffocating the child. It's I hate to say it, but it's common. It's tragic, man. And you just want to look at the parent and say, "Why are you dumb?"
Right.
Well, if you don't know any better, there's no malintent, and you can't punish them any more than they are being punished right then. I mean, so. Yes, it's tragic. Yes, it's awful and all that stuff. And I think when you take time, and not a minute, but when you take time and think about that, and I think with maturity in age and maturity in the profession, I think you can look back on stuff like that and say, that was probably a shock response. She didn't know how else to act, and give somebody a little grace.
Right.
But I've had stuff like that where a child was actually suffocated to death on purpose, and the mom just wanted to know when she could see her other kid. And I thought that was so weird, man. I was kind of a senior guy. I was training
So
a
the
deputy
mom
at the time.
suffocated the child.
No. My internet boyfriend did. It's in the book.
Yeah.
Which will be done soon, I guess, maybe. He got 20 years Florida State prison, but. Yeah, she was just very deadpan, man.
Yeah.
And she just wanted to know when she could see her son. And not, hey, is my 22-month-old daughter dead? Or did he do it? Or what's going to happen to him? Or what's going to happen to me? Or none of that stuff. And it was crazy, man. And the guy who did it, I don't know the rating of your podcast, so I don't want to use profanity, even though it's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Right.
This animal that did it, when I got on scene, he was sitting in a stool, just very, not stoic, but defiant. Just like you're wasting his time.
Right.
And he's tougher than anybody else walking on scene. And it's funny that when I got on scene and stepped out of my car, I walked up to the sergeant, because my sergeant had called me earlier and wanted me to go directly to the scene and take over for day shift while she went to the hospital. And I said, well, I'm closer to the hospital than you are. She goes, no, I don't want you to the hospital. She later explained to me why. And she knew me well. So I get there and I see this dude and I look at him and immediately he shrinks. And I was like, man, that's odd. He didn't make eye contact with me for the whole day. The detectives got to the district and started talking to him, and he was, all starched up and defiant and blah, blah, blah. And he came out in the hallway and the detective said, you can go ahead and take him to jail now. I take out my handcuffs, the guy sees me and automatically just, so much so the detective's like, bro, what did you do to him earlier? Did you say anything? Haven't said a word to him, because I knew that, and anybody should know, if you should be able to control yourself physically and emotionally while you're doing it. I mean, there are some exceptions, but having control, I think, is probably the biggest characteristic of being a responder. But knowing that if you do something that is outside of policy or outside of professionalism, whether it's physical, emotional, or you speak to somebody, that just detracts from the strength of the case. And that may be complete old wives' tale, but I've always believed that. So yeah, I didn't say anything to that dude, and man, just later we went to the hospital, my recruit and I, and the little boy was sitting there at the nurse's station at the NICU, and I will tell you this, man, and I'm almost brought to tears when I talk about these folks. NICU nurses, brother, I don't know where those people come from. I do not know if they're human beings. They are probably the closest thing that I've seen to an angel on this planet. Just their strength, the resolve, the care, the everything that goes into making a NICU nurse is just remarkable. When I was actively a cop, I was a pretty big kid. I was in shape, and a lot of people did exactly what I told them to do or what they thought I wanted them to do just by me walking into a room. So I walk into the NICU with my recruit, and I've got my look on my face because I'm pretty well disgusted with the way this call has gone so far. And the little boy, when we first saw him, the boyfriend had written "dumbass" across his forehead in Sharpie. Who does that? The kid's 4 years old. By the time I see him sitting at the NICU station, nurse's station, he is all cleaned up, and he is surrounded, absolutely surrounded by empty Happy Meal boxes. This kid is living it up, or being treated better than he had in a long time. And the nurses form a wall in front of the nurse's station. And seriously, I was like, there's something, we're going to rumble. They looked intent, and they were serious. Like, you're not taking him anywhere. I was like, whoa, we come in peace. And I'm like, I need to de-escalate here. What if I'm with you. And I told him, said, look, we're not taking him anywhere. That's not our job. We're just here to see his sister and get a prognosis, because she was unresponsive, but because it was a child and so young, paramedics worked and got her to the hospital still alive. In that, machines were keeping her, were sustaining her. And we went in that room, and buddy, she was absolutely, only word I can use to describe it was broken. There wasn't, she had fair skin. There was nothing on her that was unbruised. This animal had abused her for weeks. And I asked the nurse what the prognosis is, and she looked at me very matter-of-factly, and she said, she's an angel now. And bro, that hit me. At the time, I was like, it almost, it energized me. Yeah. Like, oh yes, today is going to be the day that somebody is, today's going to be the day. I'm going to be on my best game, and let's get to work. And it's funny because I used to have a bunch of one-liners that after a while I'd say them and other people would start repeating them, and they almost became legend. And it was funny. And one of the things that I used to say is it's not our job to balance the universe, or it's our job to balance the universe. So if one gets away, two got to pay. Yin and yang. And you could beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride. That old one. And my recruit was standing there looking at the child, and had been with me the entire time of the call, and had been training with me for 2 or 3 weeks at the time. I looked at him. I said, "Are you ready?" And he looked at me, bro. He looked through my soul, and said, "Let's go balance the universe." I was like, "Oh, yeah. I love this kid." He's got it. He's figured it out. Yeah. And I may or may not have arranged a substation's furniture. Yeah. Later that day.
Yeah. How when you let's take that.
But that suspect that rearranged the furniture or helped me rearrange it, he was also fighting and being very disrespectful to the female deputy that was there. I believe it. So he apologized to us later.
When you take that call right there, especially for this young kid who's just seeing this for the first time, I would assume maybe he'd already been on calls like that. I don't know
what you're getting ready to ask me, bro.
No, but
it's in the book.
For him, yeah. Like, what if we're saying we need officers in Oklahoma who are making minimum wage right now ran on that call? They had to. Their department doesn't have anybody, so they can't take them in.
What is their infrastructure to do something?
But let's say it's a larger town. They have 2 blinking lights. They have another officer that can cover. what is it, and this is an honest question, what is it that we do at that time for that person to let them work that out, or what does that look like? And the reason I ask this, obviously I don't think there's an answer. I just am curious as to what your take, more so maybe just what it takes for you, and maybe that will work for somebody. For me, as an example, it was not focusing on that and being able to get on another call where I'm just going to do something routine for that moment.
But what happens when it's quiet?
What happens when it's quiet? As soon as I'm off shift, that's where my mind's going. Now I'm at home, I'm by myself, and I'm left alone with my thoughts.
That's where it gets dangerous.
Right? And that's where I think law enforcement, people that are doing this job, and EMS especially, EMS has to have the resolve, because they're not only dealing with that child, they're resuscitating and they're taking that
they're responsible and hopeful.
It's one thing to take pictures of that baby. It's another thing to be the one
to hold
having
and
to
work.
pump
I mean, that's
on a baby that's not going to live, but you're going to try to keep them alive.
I think people understand that, and think about the dispatchers too.
Yeah.
They know exactly what's going on in that call. If they've been doing it more than a week, they know what these calls are going to end up as. Yeah. And unfortunately for them, and fortunately for them, they're not on scene to see it and get the resolution. They know that there's a person with a gun, and they're sending somebody that they know personally, or may even know their spouse and kids or whatever. May go to church together. They're sending them to this call that could end up with them being harmed gravely, and they have to listen to it all on the radio. I mean, dispatchers, buddy, I would put them with the ability to handle and to manage trauma. I would put them on the same pedestal as I would a first responder spouse. Yeah. I really would, because they know and they hope that you're good at your job, but they don't know what's going on in the 12 hours that you're gone and they're trying to sleep. Yeah. They're just hoping the garage doorway opens up in the morning and not a knock in the middle of the night.
Right.
So I will tell you what I do, but first I'm going to tell you what I did with my recruit that day. Nothing. And again, with the benefit of hindsight now, I'm absolutely ashamed of myself for saying that now, because I'm not ashamed of saying it now. I'm ashamed that I did it.
Right.
We just moved on. I think larger agencies, and I think some smaller agencies, but my agency and my experience is they have that infrastructure there. They have all the resources you want. You just have to ask.
Right.
That's the problem. You could have the best treatment ever, but you don't want to be taken off the job. You don't want to be seen as less than. Right. You could be being looked at for promotion or a new assignment and a better place. And, if the wheels are coming off, bro, they're going to tap the brakes on that. Then what? Yeah. There's so many things that go through your mind, and I wish I had spoken to him about that and we had worked that out. But moving past that, if you have a problem, all you need to do is say something. The mechanism is there. The machine gets put in motion. Or if a supervisor recognizes, hey, you are top person, or you are this at all times, and you come in the next day and you're less than that. I think for me, one of the biggest things as a leader is you have an obligation to make sure that your people are whole, whatever that looks like. Yeah. And if they are off somehow, bring them in and talk to them. Close the door and let them know, hey, man, I want to talk to you about something. I'm curious. Are you okay? Come on, let's talk. Yeah. Not like, see me in my office.
Right.
Bro, I've never been afraid of a bad guy, but if I see, meet me in my office, like, oh, shit, what have I done? Exactly. What is it this time? What do they think I've done? Yeah. But I think leadership, at whatever level, should be able to recognize that in their people and have the courage to ask them, and hopefully the relationship that person will be trusting enough to do that. It all starts there. Yeah. First of all, recognition, having mechanism, and getting the agencies to train their personnel to know that these are the things, these are the signs, this is what you should do as a human being, right. Not even as a matter of policy. Exactly. You should care for your people. what I do and what I did when I needed to take my minute, I'll be the first one to tell you, and this is in the book, uh, that I don't like dead bodies.
Yeah.
I don't. I could be in there. They could have lost a limb, complete trauma, bleeding out. I will tourniquet. I will patch. I will hold. I'll put a finger in a hole. Whatever needs to be done. CPR, clearing airways, whatever, bro. Like a champ, master of my shit. Sorry, we're gonna have to edit that out. But when that ends and they pass, it's a creepy feeling. Like, because you're for me, it's a creepy feeling. It's like, okay, there's no more rush for me to do this.
Yeah.
This I actually have described it as you can almost feel the cold coming on the back of your neck. I do. That's my experience with it. If it's already a body and they've already passed, I'm not as bad. But if I'm in there with the adrenaline and I'm trying to work and do all of these things, I need to take some time. And it's not a long time. It's like, oh no, guys, I got to get it. It's not like that. It's just like, whew, okay, let's recognize what just happened here and let's shift gears and get back to priorities of work. Towards the end when I was a supervisor, I ran a platoon and I would go to big calls that, required me to be there and dead bodies happened to be one of them. There was a bad crash. This guy was driving like a complete jackass, hit a median, the car flipped over, he came out and he went through a brick wall. He was eviscerated and his head was in the front yard. It's amazing what happens to bodies when they're moving in cars.
Yeah.
And one of the other supervisors came over and said, bro, you got to see this. I'm like, no, don't. That's a traffic homicide's job.
Yeah.
You've seen it. You told me the guy's dead. I don't need to go put a pulse on walk past his body and check the carotid in the front yard.
Yeah.
I don't need a medical degree for that. And he's like, bro, no, seriously, you got to see it. And I said, look, dude. I said, man, I've got 22 years of bodies stacked up in my head. I don't need another one.
Yeah.
I had an older man that his family was having a big party at the house, and he went out into his greenhouse and hung himself, and they found him. And the sergeant's there, and the sergeant that I had at the time, great human being. We came up together, and I confided a lot in him, just bouncing stuff off of him because I knew it was safe because we had a relationship.
Yeah.
And I was his boss, and he took care of me. He was a good sergeant, and still a good friend to this day. I got there, and he walked out of the backyard from the greenhouse, and he says, here's the scene, this is what's going on, and this is where we're at. Detectives have already been called. And I was like, cool, you need anything else from me? Nope. He didn't stand there, the feet swinging by her head. Oh, hold on. Okay, this,
Yeah.
so he understood. That leads into my response to your question, what do I do?
Yeah.
I avoid.
Yeah.
I avoid, I deny, I isolate, I push it down, I try to forget about it. But I will tell you, man, and I used to tell my deputies all the time, and really anybody who would listen once, I recognized that my issues, that I was not taking care of myself. And, I was at complete burnout. The wheels had come off. I was presenting well operationally at work, but everything else in my life was just garbage.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't working out, I wasn't eating right. All of the effects that you can experience from not taking care of your mental health and well-being, I was experiencing. Yeah. And finally I started, and for years prior, but I started having conversations at roll calls, and it would happen probably every week. I would say, hey, look, it's okay not to be okay. You're not supposed to experience these things. These are normal reactions to abnormal situations. Come speak to me. Come speak to one of the sergeants, blah, blah, blah. And then, one of the sergeants would say, well, I went on this call, and it was horrific, and I talked to this person about it. And, everybody would break up and kind of go away. And I've been doing that for years, man, probably a decade, my entire time as a supervisor. And I was the biggest hypocrite in the room. Because I was suffering in silence for the better part of 17 or 18 years that I recognized.
That you recognized.
And avoidance is not a good thing. Luckily for me, I didn't turn to alcohol or anything else like that, trying to self-medicate.
Right.
I would just isolate. I would come home and I've read several books since I've retired and really have learned a lot more because I want to advocate for this. That when you get home, you are completely spent. I mean, everything in your body is gone. Cortisol is through the roof. Testosterone's in the dump. I mean, when I actually got checked, that's another conversation. When I actually got checked, my testosterone was 186. My doctor's like, "How are you on your feet?" I'm like, "That's why I'm here, buddy." But yeah, the avoidance, the isolation, the denial, and just finding the next call to replace that one. No, bro, it is the most common response from what I understand, but is the worst thing you can do. In addition to, I mean, it's made worse with the self-medication and all that stuff and destructive behavior, risk-taking behavior. And of course, we know where a lot of that stuff ends. And it's tragic. I mean, it's happened in my organization. There's been several people that have died by suicide.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the question is always, how come nobody knew?
Right.
How do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I was high functioning in leadership positions, in critical positions with one of the divisions that, with the division that coordinated or helped TPD coordinate the CFP game that was here at Raymond James in 17.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were high stakes in everything I did, and I was high functioning, excelled. And that's just because I kept burying and kept driving, and I didn't want to fail or let anybody down.
Yeah.
And I think raising my hand and saying that I have an issue, and I finally did. Things changed, but that's because of other stuff, and I don't believe that it was because I said that I have an issue and I was getting help.
Yeah.
But I do know this: once I got help, my counselor, who was a friend, who's a former deputy, former soldier, we were talking, and he said, people are going to see that you're getting better. They're not going to know why or what you're doing. They're just going to notice a difference, and they're going to want a part of it. I was like, okay, we'll see, whatever, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
doc.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, once I started getting help, I would go to work, and, I had deputies. There were 7 deputies over the course of 2 weeks, 5 that didn't even work for me. I mean, that's a risk. You don't work for me, and you're going to come sit down in my office and tell me about your troubles, bro. That's a lot of trust. You're really throwing it out there.
Yeah.
And I've heard them. I heard one guy, he sat in my office, and this dude is an absolute. This guy, if you told him, hey, there's a law enforcement nexus for you to put those rocks in your mouth and chew them until your teeth break, he's going to do it, because that's just the type of dude he is. He's not going to complain. He'll do it gladly, and he's just tough. And that's how he presents. And everything I knew of the man was tough. He sat down in my office, and he said, "Sir, I don't know what to do. My back's against the wall. I don't know how to get out of this." And now he's crying. He's like, "Man, I feel like such a P word because I'm in here talking to you." And I leaned across my desk and said, "Well, do you think I'm a P word?" And he's like, "Oh, God, no." I was like, "Well, let me tell you a story." He's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, brother, there's a way through. This is the beginning of it.
Yeah.
There is a way through."
Yeah.
And
But it starts with talking.
it starts with vulnerability. First, it starts with you recognizing you have an issue. I mean, the funny thing is, and I've talked about this with a buddy of mine, that you and I went to the academy together. We hit the street together. We're working. We have the same experiences. Well, guess what? You're being made sick by the same thing that I'm being made sick by, and we're getting sick at the same rate.
Right.
So if you're not having a problem or not presenting a problem, then I shouldn't,
Right.
because we're exposed to the same thing.
Right.
We don't stop for a second to think that, hey, man, trauma is a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And there's different thresholds. I used to put it to the deputies. It was like, look, dude, if you were in a shooting and somebody starts saying, "Oh, man, I would have done this, or I'd have done that different, or I would have done this even quicker," blah, blah, blah. That's low class, bro.
Right.
You have no idea what you're talking about. Go away. Because people who do know what they're talking about, they don't talk about it.
Right. Exactly. That shows your immaturity.
But then, you leave a call where there was an infant found at the bottom of the pool and wasn't able to be resuscitated, and you have a problem with it. If somebody says, like, "Oh, bro, I've had 3 of those," you need at least 4 to have a problem.
Right.
Dude, an assumption like that, or a statement like that, or making trauma some type of a competition, bro, stuff like that keeps people sick. And I've heard people say it. I mean, we had a deputy go out, and this is incredible. Got into a shootout, was put on administrative leave during the investigation, which is, standard. He comes back to work, and as he's coming back to work, there's a car crash in the intersection where the family's trapped and the car's on fire. Dude's going to have a problem because the first one's not worked out. Any residual stuff that he was carrying into that deadly force encounter, and now this. And he tapped. He's like, "Hey, bro, I need some time."
Yeah.
And because statute had changed and PTSD or PTS, I hate the D.
Right.
PTS came out as part of statute and is looked at as a work injury. He was able to take advantage of that, and God bless him for it. But as soon as it was made known that he went out, standing in the break room, all the tough guys want to talk about how tough they are,
Right.
and how tough he isn't.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like, bro, this is
Toxic.
it's awful. It's awful. Well, I know that it happens everywhere.
Right. It does, and that I think for me, and this is what I'll say, I left law enforcement, and that's one of the reasons I left. Although I was trying to get into higher levels of federal law enforcement at the time, and that was my ultimate goal and why I left special operations to begin with, because I was working with those guys overseas, was multiple things, but it was one call where I'm taking handcuffs off of a pedophile who's laughing in my face as I'm taking the handcuffs off, and he's walking out, and the 6-8-year-old girls that he had exposed himself to on the side of the road. I'm now 2 weeks later, I'm dealing with that, and then 2 weeks is probably like 2 months, but it felt like a couple weeks later I'm at a place to eat with my wife, and there he is on a date with some girl who has no idea who she's talking to.
Oh, she would before I left.
And unfortunately, my department would have burned me to this at the stake if I had said a single word to that woman.
Yeah,
And so-
involving juveniles and all that stuff. I see that there is some gray area where they can where you be dancing into. But
Yeah, but so it was things like that where I just was like thinking to myself, I'm like gonna live with having no justice for this situation. And same thing, like, so I was involved in a situation where I went on a call, and it was a woman who passed away, but rigor mortis set in, and she was in a very odd position. So
they always are, bro.
we didn't but we didn't see her when we first entered the house, and we walked all around looking for her, and we couldn't find her, and then there she was. And so
They do have a way of hiding.
they do have a way of
It's-
hiding.
it's
They really
incredible.
do.
It's
It was
like I thought it was
wild.
part of the couch.
Right. And that's what it was. We thought it was part of the table. And so because of that, I got in trouble. It's my fault, 100%. I owned up to it. But what they did as my punishment was they made me go back through like this, like a month basically of like FTO again. And I had to work every single suicide in the city for the next like 2 months.
That seems a little excessive.
Not only was it excessive, it was to me, I would definitely say like that was where I was turned off. That maybe if I wanted to stay law enforcement a little bit longer, the fact that was what my department thought would be a good way to, right, because it wasn't supposed to be punishment, it was supposed to be, right, training me and I should learn from this experience, and all it did was make me go,
And not
This
trust
is-
the organization to take care of you.
right. It taught me that my organization is not only going to not take care of me, it's going to actually punish me. It wasn't about retraining me, it was about punishing me. And it punished me, and what I ended up doing was just seeing more and more and more people giving up and taking their own lives for virtually no right as we're looking at situations, virtually no reason. If I'm the mother who's accidentally smothered my child, or the kid, falls behind the bed, if that person committed suicide, this is
There's
tragic.
a nexus event that you can tie it to.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that's tragic. If it's a person who takes their own life because their husband rides his motorcycle too often, which is the reason this one lady had ate his gun, and then wrote all over everything, left him all kinds of notes and everything that I am doing this because you love your motorcycle more than me. And they used to ride, yeah, there's pictures of them for the last 15 years riding motorcycles all over everywhere together. And she had her own motorcycle too. And he was out on a ride with all of his buddies.
That was the written reason, man.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is, for me, I'm looking at that, and what it taught me was, this person is committing suicide for virtually no logical reason. If this lady who'd been through a tragedy, and now she's sitting here laughing, but it's like if someone in that situation decided to take themselves out, logically, as a human, I can wrap my mind around that. As a police officer, I can wrap my mind around that. All of the ones that I was working were basically, that's what it summed up to. Like, nobody who was trying to take themselves out had a really logical reason. It was these, on paper, the only thing we know of.
Yeah.
These seemingly trivial things. And it was rich people who lived in this house, and they're not up to their eyeballs in debt. And this guy has a closet that's 10 feet high with all the running shoes that he's, with every single mile he's run on every one of them, and he's been racing for 30, 40 years, and he just commits suicide, right?
Well, it goes on in somebody's life, man.
Right.
I mean, it's just, for me, I understand the act of suicide. I understand that it happens, and I understand why that it happens. And for me, for the majority of my professional life, I could never reconcile that as an end for me.
Yeah.
But there was a period there where it got very, very, very dark, and it flashed through my brain, and I was like, that day, man, that was the day that I started looking for help, and I got help. And, it doesn't go away. It gets better with help, and you can rationalize it, and I know that that's not the way that I'm going to go, but there are some people that are isolated,
Yep.
that don't understand what's going on. They're, one of the big things that are driving that, concussions when you're younger or as you get older, tissue damage, TBI. I mean, there's so many contributing factors to all that stuff. And, now that I'm saying that, there was a soldier that I went to. I was a corporal at the time. And the majority of the suicides that I went to, at a point, I was just like, oh, this is another call. This is another call.
Yep.
Just another call. And that's how I looked at it. Very sterile. It was very, not cartoonish, but it was almost like, it's a human body, but it's no worse than what you would see in a movie.
Right.
So I was acclimated. But this certain one, man, it really hit me. And it's in the book. It really hit me. I walked in, and the deputies were like, hey, we just got here. We found him. We haven't cleared the apartment yet. So let's clear it. So we went to go clear the apartment and went into his bedroom, and there was a bed there and in his closet. And he had his BDUs, his fatigues,
Yep.
in the closet. And everything was dressed, the boots, everything, his regular, tennis shoes and his clothes, everything was hung up, very neat. It's like, man, this dude lives by himself and he's single. He's doing pretty well, man, because this place is immaculate.
Yeah.
And, I noticed the uniforms and the 101st Airborne patch and all that stuff. My dad was a Screaming Eagle. So when we walk out, I go in and I see this, this Mitch helmet with dust still on it, and, a couple flashlights with dust still on them. And, it was so weird because Hannah Montana was playing on his TV. A big screen TV had been playing Modern Warfare. And I guess started watching Disney Channel, and Hannah Montana was on. That has nothing to do with this story.
Right.
But that's something that just stuck in my head. It's like, how odd is this?
Right.
And there he is laying in front of his couch, upper body trauma, pistol laying next to him. And the only thing I could think of is looking at this. And it wasn't, this wasn't a fully opened wound. We're like, oh my God. It was, everything stayed inside. And it was, even though there was a violent way to go, the scene was very serene, quiet,
Yeah.
very quiet, as nobody's really making any noise. All I could think to myself was not what was wrong or what drove him to this. How come nobody knew? Where were his teammates?
Yeah.
And that really struck me, and I never got an answer to that. And honestly, I never searched for it. But about 10 minutes into it, knock at the door. I'm like, I haven't called detectives yet.
Yeah.
And open the door, and there's brother and mom standing there. You know, I'd been on for 14 years at this time, 15 years, and I'd done my fair share of death notifications. Never got good at it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah.
But I held the mom's hand, and before I could open my mouth, bro, she broke down. I mean, it was like broke down. I don't know if you've ever experienced the sound that a mother makes when she finds out she's lost her child.
Yeah.
Bro, if you've ever heard it, I'm sorry for you. But it's like I'm going to try to lighten this up a little bit. It's like the smell of bacon.
Yeah.
You smell it, you know what it is.
Yeah.
You don't need to know that somebody's cooking bacon. You're like, ooh, bacon.
Right.
When you hear that sound, you know what caused that sound. There is no other sound in the world like it.
Unmistakable for sure.
And it moves through you. Oh my God, bro. It is soul ripping. And I've heard it several times, man, and it just man, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's real bad. That one stuck with me.
Right. And that's the
The thing I think, what we're talking here to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, we could do this all day.
I know we could, and also, you know, you've already recorded a lot of this stuff down in your book, which is
That's okay, lights going, so we're good.
That's
We're good.
Okay. You've already recorded a lot of this in your book, which obviously I can't wait to read as well. Go ahead and tell what is the name of the book or anything like that? Do we have any of that figured out yet and
Oh yes,
finalized?
the name was figured out before I
Wrote it.
even penned it. I was warned before I retired from law enforcement. I guess I have to do the full disclosure thing here. The wheels started coming off, and my administrative duties were slipping, and that was unlike me. That's my thing. You know, an eval would come in, I'd stop everything and work on that eval until it was a good representation of what that troop had done. To this point, you know, we have 30 days to do them. And I'd get the email, hey, this is due at midnight tonight. Bro, I'm putting together garbage just trying to get it done because I just put it off. I didn't have the energy to do it. Physically, mentally, directing scenes, everything, man, I was present, but I was sleeping an hour to 2 hours a day. And this has been going on for 8 or 9 months by that point. And that's when everything came to a head because, you know, as anybody will tell you, and I think the science is there from what I understand, that if you're not sleeping, you can't manage the things that you normally would be able to manage.
Yeah.
And that's when the PTS came to a head and the depression and the anxiety. And of course, me feeling like everything's falling apart is only adding to the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I would go home, late in the shifts, but it'd be early. I'd have the sergeant take over, and I'd write down the times of when I left, because I did my payroll at the beginning of the pay period, like it was common practice for years and years and years.
Yeah.
But the policy was you do it every day.
Yeah.
So I was good for a while, and then at a point, I just stopped writing it down, thinking I'll remember it. Well, my memory was shot to shit.
Yeah.
So, I would enter the times like, oh, did I leave at 2:45 or was it 3:15 on that day? Well, I think it was 3. Well, if it was 2:45, I just took 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So that added up over the course of a year to right at 40 hours. I went home early one night. An event happened that should not have happened. It wasn't anything catastrophic, but the question was asked, where was Doug? If Doug was here, this would not have happened. And they happened to pull and saw that my payroll said till 6, but my log off was like 15 minutes before this event happened. And I said, let's go back. How often does this happen? And it was there. Now, to my credit, I knew I'd already been in counseling for 6 weeks by this point, by the point that the event occurred. So regardless of anything else, I mean, I completely have to own that because at the very least, I violated the policy of not doing my payroll every day.
Yeah.
Had I followed the very simple policy, we'd have been good to go because I had the time in my bank.
Yeah.
I just, I was slipping. So that kind of, at 22 years, I was demoted straight down to deputy. And of course, the emotions that come along with that, the feelings or the perception of organizational betrayal, or how can they do this to me? I'm trying to get help, and they wouldn't do this to somebody else, and all the things that you tell yourself to try to justify why you're not a failure the entire time you're thinking you're a failure.
Right.
So, of course, battling that for years. But the point of the story here is I was told, I went in and I signed the paperwork accepting the demotion. I even worked as a platoon commander for 2 weeks after that, knowing I was being demoted. So I signed off on it. I wasn't going to, defend myself in any way, shape, or form. I even told Internal Affairs, no, you're wrong here. This is exactly how that went. And it was not in my favor.
Right.
Nobody does that.
Yeah.
But I was told after I signed it, be careful how you tell this story. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, bro, I did wrong. I owned every bit of this from the start, all of it.
Yeah.
Why that?
Right.
And he may have done it for my own good, like, thinking against my character that I'm going to walk out of the room and start, MF in the office and how they did this to me, they'll do it to you, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Bro, that's not my style.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
The answer is drive on.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
I simply dropped my pack. I got called out. Time to drive on. And I did.
Yeah.
But I was told, be careful how to tell the story. So the name of the book is Be Careful How You Tell the Story. And it is not what it started out to be.
Right.
It started out to be just a chronicle of cop stories, because the books that I've read, and then I read the reviews. Oh man, I thought this was going to be a cop book. Like, why do you want to hear about that stuff?
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I always thought that was so strange.
It's like,
Yeah.
if you've been there, you don't want to be there.
We
It's
all
the
wanna
people
sit
that have
around
never
and listen
been
to
there
each
that want to
other's
hear it.
stories.
Yeah, it's like, oh, tell me a story. Like, bro, first of all, I'm not going back there by telling this story for your amusement. So it was going to be trauma stories.
Yeah.
My trauma and my failure.
Yeah.
But as I started writing that, man, this is remarkable. It just started. So I sat down and I started writing, and it was pouring out of me. I sat down with a cup of coffee at 8:30. My cup of coffee was cold, and I was about to refresh it, and I looked at my watch, and it was 4:30 in the afternoon. I'd put down 10,000 words just as quickly as I could think. Luckily, I write the way that I speak, and I'm not a moron, so it was pretty good to start with. It was a good draft. And after about a week and a half, I had 70,000 words.
Wow.
That's a book.
Yeah.
So then I started reading through it, man, and because I never proofread anything that I did. So I went back and started reading, and what I found is I actually wrote this book, this first draft, my hero's journey, as if I was the victim. And that really struck me, man. I was like, these things happened to me. I'm like, no, that's not exactly the case. I volunteered for what I did, fully knowing what the price was going to be. My reactions to these things are within my control and only within my control. Why am I presenting myself as a victim? It caused me to read more books and think and listen to podcasts and really reflect and do a lot of introspection. And like I told you today, I am in a different place than I was when we met back in January. Yeah. I'm still volunteering for the Veterans Service Organization. That's going great. It really is fulfilling. And I'm just being the dad and the husband that I should have been for 25 years. Because I gave everything to work. And so with all of that introspection, I started again. I realized that 70,000 words was the journal that I should have been keeping for 30 years. Who would have thought that writing shit down was actually helpful?
Right. Yeah.
People would say, hey, why don't you journal? I'm like, dude, who journals?
Right.
No,
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah. So I started again, and I am at 50,000 words now. And the books that I've read on these subjects and talking about transition and everything else, they are right around 100 pages. It's a short read. It's packed full of information and to the point. It's good stuff. So instead of writing the novel, the Harry Potter that I was thinking about writing, I'm going to keep it to about 100 pages. And I'm actually going through and weeding some of the stuff out. But now this story this is how I grew up. There's no childhood traumatic events here. This is my military time. This is when I met my wife and the relationship that we had. This is my entire time with, in the law enforcement career. Here's a few calls that we didn't talk about. And the reason that they're in the book is not for your shock value. It's for, this is how bad this event was in great detail that I can recall. And then the end of each one of those is, this is what I did wrong. I didn't talk to my recruit about this. I didn't talk to anybody about this. There was a call that I went on with who's one of my best friends at the office. Still to this day, we literally started and ended our careers shoulder to shoulder. We were at a horrific traffic crash when we were rookies. We didn't talk about it at that scene or after that scene, and we didn't even bring it up until the day I retired.
Wow.
I'm not talking about the week. The day that I was walking out, and brother, he had a problem with it. Of course, he did a lot more of the lion's share of that work, but he had a problem. I'm thinking, this guy was in my wedding. He's my friend. I know 4 phone numbers by heart. My best friend when I was a kid, my parents' phone number, my wife's phone number, and his phone number. I don't need it written down.
Yeah.
I've known it since 1998.
Yeah.
And him with mine. And we never spoke about this. What does that say about us as friends? What does that say about us as colleagues? What does that say about us as men? Why couldn't we do this for each other?
Right.
So that's in there. And those stories culminate with that. You know, why didn't I do this? Or I could have done this. And one of them is I did do this. And this was the impact and how it worked out. And it was great. And then after that is I got a little bit about the case in there and how the wheels fell off, the impact of all of this, the not sleeping, the over-identifying, the driving for professional perfection and getting to the peak of performance and all of these things, the impact that it had on my family. God bless my wife. It's only by the grace of God and her grace and understanding that we're married.
How long have you guys been married today? Roughly?
July 8th will be 24 years.
24. Wow.
There's been no separation, no nothing. I mean, dude, I'm telling you, she cares for me so much. I broke my ankle back in 2003, and it's still very unstable. She cares for me so much that when we're walking down the street, and just this last weekend at Disney, walking across the tracks for the little train that goes up and down Main Street, she'll point down, watch your foot, watch your step. She takes such good care of me. And I mean, it's despite my best efforts to be a jerk and not earn it. I mean, she freely gives the love. And I tell you, without her, none of this healing, this story would not be happening. None of it. It would be a completely different story. So the impact it had on them, and then it's going to be the day I retired and what that felt like, and then transitioning. Not looking for a job because I've had one for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, bro, you're only 49 years old. True.
Right.
And I'm 50 now. Can I still work? Absolutely. Do I need to? No.
Yeah.
But what am I going to do?
Right.
And the answer to that is whatever I want to do. Who am I going to be? And the answer to that is whatever I want to be.
Right.
And I'm just trying to wait for the universe to tell me what it is. And, bro, I wanted to be an author. I wanted to be a DOD contractor. I wanted to support the soft enterprise. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. I wanted to go teach bombs. I mean, there are so many things that I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and I just searched for a day. I mean, last week I applied for an MBA program.
Wow. Okay.
Am I going to do it?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
because I don't think I need an MBA to do what I want to do.
Right.
And I feel that that talking to people and helping people through their transition and what they're going through, and not that I'm any expert or not that what I did is going to work for you, but just to tell you that you're not alone.
Yeah.
I just need to figure out how to make money doing that and work from home.
Yeah.
So if you got any ideas or anybody out there has any ideas outside of the awful comments that I'm going to get about the Sandwich Street girls,
Right. Right.
please let me know. Reach out. I'm always looking for good answers.
Awesome.
So obviously, it's been a great help. I think especially for any young men who were thinking about going into law enforcement, are still thinking about going into law enforcement, and I think the things that we talked about, just to kind of put a little bow on that, like recognizing is the first step, obviously, and of course the 12-step program, recognizing you're an alcoholic, recognizing you're addicted to drugs. It's always the recognition, and of course that's the very first step, because you don't even know, you're not looking for anything else until you've already recognized it. So go into the recognize spot to be step one, because besides that you're tough and you don't need any of that, and you're just going to keep pushing it down. Once you're at that, where do you go? And saying, like, for instance, again, these are law enforcement officers all across the country, departments that don't necessarily support their people, or feel that they're going to be looked down upon even if they actually aren't, and all those things, right? everybody's in a totally different situation, but the point is you need to talk to someone. And if even if that's all okay, you're scared of doing that, or you're not scared, you're worried that you might end up getting pulled, you're not going to be a cop anymore, you're going to lose. Okay, cool.
So
Agreed, agreed. But here's the
I,
thing.
and I was in
For
space.
you and
No,
for
I'm
me,
with you. But now
for
looking
you and
back,
me, it's easy
so,
to say that.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
If you're the cop on the other end of this,
Oh no, that's not even a conversation.
right, right. I'm not even.
You can't
listening
do
to that.
anything else. You got 10 people waiting to take your job.
Right, exactly.
You know, you're a line item number. No.
But going to
there's
talk
life afterwards.
to somebody, even if it is just your best friend who you haven't confided in, and like your story, and that's why I love that you ended on that. Somebody that you started with, you saw the exact same things, and you finish with, and this is one of your best friends. He's in your wedding, and you never talked about this one situation, and
Never.
he still was carrying with him all that time.
No, and this is a man that I'll tell I love him.
Yeah.
And I do.
Yeah,
Like a brother. I don't have one, but he's the closest thing that I would consider.
100%.
And we never talked about it, man.
Yeah.
You have to say something. People are there to help. You just have to say something.
But I think a lot of people, I was of the opinion, especially from my military background and the multiple deployments and stuff we did and were a part of, and stuff obviously in the war is pretty horrific. You don't know how to work things out, and I think that's where the take a minute, take some time off, decompress. All these words are said. When I got back from my first combat deployment, the invasion of Iraq, I thought was hilarious, as we all laughed about it, that they required special operations as a whole put in place that we were required to have certain amount of time off, 72 hours on this weekend, 96 hours on this weekend, to decompress, have us time to go before we start training up for the next cycle, because that's all we're going to be doing is war and war and war, and we're going to be behind the lines, we're going to be at the front of the lines, we're going to be everywhere, because that's where SOCOM is, and our deployments are super short because we're just hitting targets every single night, multiple targets in single nights. And that they already found out you can only do that for a few months. Even at the highest level, you got SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, you got all the coolest guys. They're still only going to make it a few months before they start to suffer drastically. And so we come back and they make us, and we land on the plane. We want to get out. We want to go see our families. We haven't been allowed to make a phone call. We're not allowed to talk to our family because they were never allowed to know where we were, and so we weren't able to make calls or even talk to our family yet. And now we're sitting in a hangar, and we're not allowed to leave until we talk to the psych, until we talk to the shrink. Are you joking right now?
You got
You're
anything to
telling
say?
me
Nothing to say. Good
right?
to go.
Literally, all we did was ask for her number. That's literally. We go in, and literally the guys, of course, who had came in before was like, "Yeah, I tried for her number too. Try it and see what happens." As a joke, because we're not actually going to tell her anything,
Yeah.
and if we try to distract her with something, and so literally that's what everybody was doing.
Yeah,
Like
good
it was a joke, and we walk in like, "Did you see people burn? Did you smell burned body? Did you see dead people? Did you
You're like,
enemy,
calm
friendly,
back.
all of it?" I'm like, yep. All right, are you having dreams? No. Are you having any issue? No. And I was telling the truth. But at the end of it, she's like, "Well, is there anything you want to talk about?" And that was the one time where I was like, okay, these are all just check boxes. I'm not saying, and I get to this and I'm like, "I'm sorry, what do you want me to say to you? I'm confused. Like, what would you want me to say?" And she's like, "Well, you can talk about anything." I'm like, "I'm not allowed to leave, and neither is anybody else
Until you
until
leave out of
we're
this room."
cleared." So the people standing in the hallway I didn't actually say all this. What I said there, I said to her, I was like, "I don't have anything to say. Yes, I've seen bad things, but I was also mentally prepared for that, and I come from another branch of service, so this isn't day one for me. Like, I'm good.
This is what I came to do.
Yeah, I want to go home, and being here waiting for everybody else to come see you is a detriment to all of us right now. I know that's not your problem and your fault, or I know it's not your fault, but I'm just letting you know, like, we're all pretty upset that we're having to sit here and wait to talk to you. If somebody's actually going to talk to you, they're not going to do it right now.
No, we're
It would have to be
see.
later.
Yeah.
But that's not when it was mandatory, and that's the thing, right? It should be just like with these law enforcement agencies, and this is why I want to wrap it up is you and I have both experienced, I've experienced a very tiny fraction of the amount of time that you've spent on the road, and that amount of work that you've put in, you've experienced and gained a lot of experience through other people too in leadership. Recognizing there's an issue, talking to someone, journaling. I think that's one of the things that I haven't started journaling. I've started just kind of using my phone and Evernote to record to my
Getting it out. It's better to write
record
it, I
thoughts. But I think that there's something different between taking a pen, your brain making sure what you're wanting to put down is what you put down, and then putting it down with your hand. I think that there's something therapeutic in that, and of course there's a lot of professionals that will say that there is, and I've been listening to different people talk about that. I think it's interesting, and I definitely would recommend people try it. Like if you're in that position, if I'm the cop, I just started, I don't want anybody to think that I'm weak. Nobody else is asking for help either. Listen, if you just start helping yourself, this is what you could do to start. Start journaling your thoughts. The second that you have a thought of possibly harming yourself, that is a line. You have crossed that line. Your brain has crossed that line. That is a moment where you should take a pause and literally think to yourself, I can't do this on my own. At that point, you have to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And just again, my background, my grandfather, now my camera went off, it's fine. My grandfather committed suicide. I've got aunts in my family committed suicide. I've got family members that, I wasn't necessarily super close with, but they committed suicide, and obviously the 22 a day, and just having not personally had like one of my best friends commit suicide, but again, having to work all those people's suicides. I think it kind of stacks up in your brain, and you're so like brought down. I think that somebody would do that, and that they would see that as the option out. And as I actually preached a sermon on it, it was really strange timing. I was preaching a sermon at a congregation that didn't have a full-time preacher, and it was Saturday is when we got the word that my grandfather had committed suicide. And I already had a different sermon completely written and was prepared for the few hours before I give this. And I immediately scrapped that and wrote a whole sermon and taught from the Bible and from my experience. And I was like, one of the thoughts that came to me, and this maybe I'm completely wrong, but what I see when somebody commits suicide is that they think that their pain is going to go away and that people are better off. And I think that's the self-talk that a lot of them use is people are going to be better off, my kids, my family, whatever. They don't really care. They're going to be better off when I leave. What I've seen happen, because once you've committed suicide, you don't get to see what happens. When you're the police officer who has to respond, and it's not close to you, it's very easy to actually 100% see what's happening. You get to see that pain that you were going through is now carried by each one of those people. And not just the ones that you're thinking of, because it's all the other people.
There's second and third order effects of suicide. It's
and the
devastating.
The percentage of people who are more likely to commit suicide after having lost a family member or someone, a close friend, is drastically higher. So that's, I guess, the main thing that I want people to take away from us telling cop stories and old ladies falling down and I can't help them because I'm not strong enough. It's like, we've both experienced enough that we know what it looks like, that I had to walk away from law enforcement, because I felt like I wasn't doing, honestly, any good. And there was just, my marriage wasn't going to last. When you say that your marriage lasts this long, that to me is it's more impressive than you know, because what I know is how bad that I treated my wife when we were newly married, and because I was just cramming it all down. And like you said, when you walk through the door, you're spent. I don't know that I'm spent, and I was actually designated as happy, smile, wave officer, because all of our department windows up, tinted, shades on, doesn't look at you, doesn't wave, doesn't smile, no contact. That's what our department was. Nobody did it. Nobody waved at anybody. Nobody talked to any. You just drive with your sunglasses on, windows up. You're not interacting with these people. And because of it, we got a reputation as a department. You don't want to mess with those guys. That was a good thing, we thought. But that's just not how I'm built.
No.
So I would roll my windows down. I would get out, go to garage sales, and chat with people and visit with them and find out all kinds of useful information. The point is, I was always way nicer to criminals and to people that I could control my feelings, because I had to control them. And I knew I didn't want ever a case of somebody innocent or a victim to then not get justice because this criminal gets to walk away scot-free. And instead, I didn't hurt my wife or anything like that. I was just not nice to her. I was literally just kind of miserable, disengaged, isolating myself, and just emotionally not there for her.
Yep.
And at the beginning of our marriage, we got married while I was a police officer. I'm very lucky that, to this day that we are married, and, we finished 16 years
That's awesome.
in December. And we now have our first son, IVF. It was never going to happen any other way. And I think God, led it. I think God made that in the plan for me, because if I had been a police officer when I had a son, I just was not going to be emotionally there for him whatsoever. And the joy that I
can relate
to go through
Yeah.
now. But that's the thing. I want anybody who's thinking about becoming a police officer to understand that there's so much to being a police officer, and I hope that we could shed some light onto what it's really like. And I hope that nobody takes away from this that it's because we talked about serious things and things that matter and things that nobody else are talking about, that it's all dark and gloom. There's so much fun, and you will have more life experiences as a police officer in one shift than you're going to have in a lot of professions your entire duration there at that job. And the people that you work with, all cops are friends with just cops, because we're the ones who can.
I don't recommend that.
Right, but that's the way it goes, because these are the people you can relate to. They have the dark sense of humor you have. You have to keep pushing it down and pretending. And again, the self-medication. We need people to not self-medicate, to look toward other people and other avenues, because ultimately that's the only way that everyone is going to be able to survive this life and end up having something at the end of it. You retiring, the life expectancy of a law enforcement officer is no more than 5 years.
Oh, not me, brother.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. So if you're lasting longer, that statistic is for a reason. How many other people are only lasting for 5 years, 10 years, you know what I'm saying, and are choosing to go down the self-medication because now I don't have a gun, I don't have a badge. Now my purpose in life, which I've always had, this used to be my city. Now I can't even pull anybody over and give him a ticket when he's driving like an idiot.
Weird.
It's weird.
It's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I really have left to say, because that feeling after you leave, that's another episode. But I would say that my military experience and my civilian law enforcement experience, very rewarding. I would not be who I am today. I would not have learned the lessons. I wish if I had to do it all over again, I would have taken better care of myself.
Yeah.
The benefit of hindsight is nice, but you don't get that. You don't regret anything until you've done something. That's the only way it can become regret.
Yeah.
And although I was enjoyed successes and have a pension and all these wonderful things and had a good reputation when I left, there was a cost. And as long as you're aware that there's a cost, it's going to take a toll. This is what it looks like, and to take care of yourself, associate with actual human beings, not people you work with.
Yeah.
Don't overinvest, because I'm here to tell you, a law enforcement agency, the day you leave and that door closes behind you, that's it, brother.
Yeah.
And when I say that's it, you can't even get back in the building. I was standing on a curb waiting for a sergeant to come pick me up in the July Florida sun, holding a book bag, feeling like a complete dope.
Yeah.
Because I could have gone into any 5 minutes before I could have gone into any room in the office, but I couldn't get into HR's lobby. I mean,
Wow.
it's crazy, and it is a crazy feeling. But you need to be aware of all that and be ready for it, because if you're prepared with the knowledge on the front end, you can prevent not all the stuff, but you can prevent your reactions to a lot of this stuff and stay healthy, man. That's the key.
Yeah.
That is the key. Yeah, that's it, man. Just live long enough to bankrupt the state with your pension.
Exactly.
That's the key.
That's the goal.
And that's all I got, man.
Thank you for being on here, brother.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate the invite.